Packers versus Saints game, which I don't even know if you can call that a game last night. That was, I think, objectively, probably the worst performance I've seen by a team this season so far. And I'm talking about worse than the Carolina Panthers in the first half of the season before Bryce Young got his mojo. This was a complete shit show last night. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the Saints situation, and the Raiders situation too, because I did not get a chance to really react to the Raiders win, which is it a win when you miss out on one of the top picks in the NFL draft? Their win against the Jacksonville Jaguars, no Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones. We'll talk about that in a second. But shout out to everybody here. Shout out to the chat. I'm going live off my phone. And by the way, I just pressed a button, and this. I'll give you some behind the scenes on YouTube, even though you guys probably mess with YouTube too. You can press a button and make yourself look sexier with YouTube mobile. So don't get catfished out there, guys, by some of these ladies. They are literally like this, and then you click a button on YouTube. Oh, now we're looking young. We're looking like a hottie now. So be on the lookout for that. And so more people are filing in. Shout out to Sean, Dustin, Nelma. Why did we win? Raiders. Okay, so the title of this, and you guys have probably who have clicked on this obviously know the title of this. I don't think I'm going to change it, although that does happen sometimes. The title of this is "The Saints Are a Disaster Without Derek Carr." I had some more incendiary titles. Maybe you know what? I might even change it to something. The Saints are a effing joke without Derek Carr. I might change it to that. Now, and maybe I'll reveal some information here, but or maybe I'll do it another day. Some more sensitive information. But what I will say is, I actually thought the Saints were going to be kind of competitive in this game. Shout out to everybody here, by the way. Get the likes up. We can see if we can boost this in the algorithm, get more people here. We've only been live for about 2.5 minutes. And I'm sorry to the people watching this not live. We're going to do these little shout outs every once in a while. But I did originally think the Saints were going to be competitive in this game against Josh Jacobs and the Green Bay Packers. Now, the reason being is because when Jake Hayner got his chance to start in this previous week for the Saints in Derek Carr's absence. Remember, he's been out for 2 weeks with a broken hand on his non-throwing hand, so he's missed the past few games. Got knocked out basically against the New York Giants. I'm gonna go ahead and take off this little filter. It's a little too fake. So against the New York Giants, and hey, they got the win at the end of the day. Jake Haener was able to close that game out. It was a tough game. I felt like they did not perform well, especially the offense, considering the fact that you're going up against one of the worst teams in the NFL, the New York Giants. However, I will say one of the strengths of the Giants team is their defense. I really like Thibodeau, the pass rusher from Oregon, who's now on the New York Giants. That being said, Carr's been out for the past few weeks. Jake Haener got his opportunity to start at quarterback for the Saints. Fresno State QB. I've watched him live in person. I've liked the guy, and I like his style. And then the fact that he's undersized. He does remind me a little bit of Bryce Young, of Kyler Murray, some people who are doubted because of their size. I wanted the Raiders to take a flyer on him in the fourth or fifth round when he came out of that 2023 draft class. But when he had that opportunity, when he did get his chance to finally play, it was bad. It was really bad, complete disaster, not competitive at all whatsoever. And then you finally saw Spencer Rattler get into the game. Now, Spencer Rattler has not won a single game as a starter, but when he filled in for Jake Haener in Jake Haener's first start of the season, he really made the team look competitive. It looked like they had a serious shot to win their matchup with Spencer Rattler in that game. Obviously, they would lose, but then you have this upcoming week against the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Green Bay Packers, probably the third best team in the NFC, definitely a top 10 team in the NFL. And for us Raiders fans who watched that game last night, when you're looking at the Green Bay Packers, any Raiders fan who did not want Josh Jacobs, did not want the Raiders to Tag him again. Tag him again. I think that may not have been an option since they tagged him too many times, but offer him the same amount of money that the Green Bay Packers offered him, which was basically the same amount as a franchise tag. Plus, he has some options that the Packers can get out of. But basically, the Packers are paying this guy 12, 13 million a year, and they can move on from him whenever they want. But if they do keep him on the roster, Josh Jacobs is 12 or 13 million a year. And if you watched that game last night, he looked like maybe one of the most valuable non-quarterback players, definitely on the offensive side of the football in the entire NFL. I mean, if there's a Jamar Chase level running back, that something that you can say is on that same level, that big of a contributor, it's Josh Jacobs. The guy looked absolutely amazing last night, and I've been following obviously him this entire year. I drafted him on my fantasy football team because even though week 1 was not amazing, I knew he would take advantage of this opportunity. Being in a more competitive team than the Raiders have been over these past few years, really haven't been competitive and since 2021. However, I will give the Raiders a little bit of credit for 2022. Even though Josh McDaniels was the head coach, they were in a lot of games. They just blew it. And we got some people in the chat talking about this, saying almost cried seeing Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr after the game. And if you guys have not seen that video, I was gonna try to share it, but I'm on my phone. I cannot. You could find it. And it's a really brief video, and you'll probably see it on the news today, where they give the post game handshake. Carr, obviously not in uniform, didn't dress out because he's injured. And thank you, Shamrock Morton, for subscribing. But yeah, we saw them embrace each other. They talked about how they missed each other, and there was some bro camaraderie there. And it looked great to see those guys because when you see both of those two dudes together as a Raiders fan, it makes you think of 2021. It makes you think of the last time the Raiders were relevant because the Raiders, unfortunately, these past 2 seasons have not been too relevant. Although last year in 2023, there was an opportunity to make the playoffs. They just lost against the Colts and Gardner Minshew, their eventual quarterback. But that was tough to see for fans because you're pretty much seeing some mistakes. And when it comes to the Raiders, let's pivot to this a little bit. Quarterback and running back are the two positions that you could objectively say are dinging the Raiders here. And some people say, well, if you don't have the franchise quarterback settled, maybe there's no point in paying a Josh Jacobs. Now that is true. It depends if you're trying to win or not and trying to lose to get one of the top picks in the draft. But when you're looking at teams like the Indianapolis Colts, they remain competitive because they paid their running back, that being Jonathan Taylor. Uh, you know, running backs really can carry teams. Look at the decline of the San Francisco 49ers without Christian McCaffrey since that guy has not been available this year. I think he is the single biggest piece that a lot of people don't talk about that is really dinging the San Francisco 49ers. If they had Christian McCaffrey, I think Brock Purdy looks a lot better than he does this year, which Brock Purdy's looking so bad this year, the Niners might go back and get Jimmy G. I mean, who knows, really? It was a pretty nasty game this past Sunday. Now, that was tough to watch. But the Green Bay Packers, Josh Jacobs, that was awesome. And maybe Tom Telesco, the general manager, should have paid Josh Jacobs. What I don't like about how the general manager handled the situation, and I think it kind of leads to the idea that the general manager, Tom Telesco of the Raiders, is going into the season to lose, to tank, because from what Josh Jacobs has said in interviews, the Raiders didn't even offer this guy a deal. The Raiders did not even have a conversation with him. He said this in an interview, I believe it was the Chris Long podcast, where he said, they wanted me to take a pay cut. And he's like, you want me to come back on a discount and lose? He had that famous line that many of you are probably aware of. And then he also said that he felt done dirty by the Raiders because the GM didn't even talk to me. We didn't even have a conversation. And that's very disappointing. And that sucks for the Raiders. And it sucks for the players on the Raiders too, as well. Who, if you have somebody like Josh Jacobs, you've seen this guy. I'm looking at the offense of the Packers. Jordan Love, he's a young guy still. He's not the leader of that offense. You watched them yesterday. Josh Jacobs is the clear leader of that team, and Jordan Love did not even look that that great, honestly. For some reason, there's some messages held for review. Hopefully, there's nothing too inappropriate in the chat. Okay, now pivoting to the New Orleans Saints, and then we'll get to the talking more about the Raiders as well, and just this game in general. Well, you know what? I thought this game in general was horrible for the NFL. We're gonna have a game that is on prime time on Christmas Eve, the eve before Christmas Eve, and the game is over by the second quarter. I mean, I I was looking at the time and I was like, are people even going to watch? And look, this is a huge stage. Primetime games during the holidays. This is huge. This is when families are together. You got maybe relatives that you don't know that well, haven't talked to in a while. What's the perfect icebreaker? Football. What's the perfect way where, if there's any tension in the room, people could sit around, stare at the screen, comment on the game, warm up to one another, get rid of any other drama that might be going on, block out that noise, and just focus on this game and the ups and downs of this football game. It's a huge stage, prime time during the holidays. I think that's probably when they get some of the most views the league gets. And it's also in a situation where there's the playoffs, right? This matters. If this team wins, this happens. If they lose, this happens, right? All the calculations. So it was huge letdown. I think for the NFL, I think for fans everywhere, to even have that game on, to have that game on Monday Night Football, it was a complete disaster because it was so lopsided. The game, and look, the game was so bad. I don't think the game should have even been on Sunday. I don't think it deserves to be on 10 a.m. Pacific time Sunday. They should have just canceled this game. They should have just pulled the plug. Saints forfeit, move on. Let's let everybody rest and just cancel that shithole game. That's what they should have done. Okay. Now, where was everything in terms of the disaster of the game? Is it all on the QB? Are there certain situations out of people's control? Because Spencer Rattler, like we mentioned earlier, got his start, got his chance to really to look. If he would have gone in that game, and if the score ends up being 31 to 14, 31 to 17, but Spencer Rattler plays mistake-free football, and you're kind of like, well, he doesn't have any great receivers. If it was something like that, then I think that's a win for Spencer Rattler, the fifth round pick in the rest of his career. And I was rooting for this guy because I really liked how he performed when he stepped in after Jake Hayner shit the bed starting last week. So it was just not good for him. Now we know there's injuries on the offensive side of the football for the Saints. In particular, they lost Eric McCoy, their center, during the game, and you saw the Saints even under Carr start to decline. I believe it was week 3 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and then week 4 against the Atlanta Falcons. They were in those games though, one possession games that went down to the wire, and it came down to the defense no longer able to hold up any longer against the Falcons and the Eagles in week 3 and week 4, respectively. But that was without members of their offensive line. They were still competitive. Now, this time, no center leaves the game early for Spencer Rattler. Wide receiver has been an issue for the Saints pretty much since Chris Olave got knocked out against the Carolina Panthers when you had Michael Thomas talking shit on Derek Carr again. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was week 10. I don't know. But and that was when the Saints lost to the Carolina Panthers. But it's the new Carolina Panthers. And I think Bryce Young, well, we could talk about him later. I think he does have a shot to turn it around. And it shows that you shouldn't write off all these top quarterbacks, especially ones that get drafted high. Should the Raiders hit up Trey Lance? No, we're not going to go that far. But the Saints had several injuries to the wide receiver position. They were also missing MVS in this game, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and I think that was huge. This guy's pretty much replaced that Rashid Shaheed role for the Saints, and you've kind of only seen their offense be really productive when they get those long bombs to him, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, over these past few weeks. Now, without him, and there's been moments when they did not have him before because he's only been on their team for about 4 weeks. The Saints really didn't have much at wide receiver. You got Cedric Wilson, Mason Tipton, a lot of people that I think most NFL fans probably don't even know who they are. Sorry, I wanted to give up that burp. But in the end, though, and I believe there was pressure in the end, the The point of Spencer Rattler, and I think you saw this a couple times, is you got all these problems on offense. You're probably not going to have a productive day passing. Well, at least he could scramble for 10 yards. And the guy's not fast. He's really not fast. I think his 40 time was 5 seconds. He's really not fast. Like, he's not really fast at all. But he's willing to scramble and does. Son of a bitch, my bad. But he's willing to scramble. He's willing to take some angles in order to get a few yards here and there. But when you saw him, man, he just did not look comfortable throwing the football. He even had that really good pass early on to Foster Moreau. Yeah. So I accidentally clicked on a wrong app, and so I disconnected there. We lost a few people, but it seems like people are filing back. Hopefully. However, really his first completion to another former Raider, Foster Moreau, early in the game. It was one of his first big completions for a first down. That was kind of a risky throw. When you really look back at it, it was a throw that could have easily been intercepted. Now I do give the guy credit that he did sort of thread the needle here, but it was a very risky throw, really risky throw. And then you saw that start to catch up to him in that game. That's when you had the interception later on. That's when you had just really some really just errant passes. And I think it proved last night, and you saw the reaction from Saints fans online, obviously. And their reaction was kind of like they recognized reality, which is the team is significantly better with Derek Carr at quarterback. I mean, we thought, and this was an option that I was even open to. Is the team so bad that is there even a point to having Derek Carr in at QB for the Saints? That is a very fair question for an organization to ask themselves. Is this team so bad that there's no point in even having, a quarterback for 33, I think it's 33 million a year. Is that even worth it? Should you just, phone it in, do something like the Giants, start a Daniel or not a Daniel Jones, but start a Drew Lock and just tank, right? Is that what you should do? But when you started to watch how the Saints played under Spencer Rattler, I feel like obviously the playbook's going to be limited. The adjustments at the line of scrimmage, limited, tons of things like that. It was amazing to think, in my opinion, it was amazing to think that Carr had this same exact roster, same squad, with the same injuries and everything. Maybe you have MVS for a couple games, but still, pretty much the same exact thing. And it was amazing to see that just a few weeks ago, before he landed on that hand, they actually had a shot to beat the LA Rams. The game went down to the last play to tie it, and then they're going to go for the 2 point conversion for the win. That they beat the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, it's like when you watch this team that played yesterday, could you imagine them beating the Atlanta Falcons? It's absolutely insane to even think. So you saw the reaction from fans, and I think they started to sort of, a lot of people, even some of the Saints influencers, I felt like some of them, the more sober ones, the ones who aren't just vehemently, hate Derek Carr because he's associated with Dennis Allen and, the fact that they have not been that productive. Although I do think last year was pretty good. And we'll talk about Dennis Allen in a second, but I think they sort of realized, like, hey, this organization really needs this guy. This team is significantly better when he's in the game. Even when we have nobody at wide receiver, there's actually a shot to win. And even talking about the offensive line, like the offensive line has looked good for the most part. They were doing a bad job last night as well. And defensively, the team looked good in the first half of the year. Last night, they looked like they could have been the worst defense in the NFL. Granted, they're going up against a good Packers team, but looking at this defense, these aging players, these players who, even when they were in their prime, and I'm not talking about all of them, but these players are just, were they ever elite? You have to ask yourself, were they always just great, above average, good for the Saints, but not necessarily a dominant pass rusher? Like, I don't want to say names to be mean, but was Cam Jordan ever, a Nick Bosa? Was he ever really that, right? I don't know. I didn't even hear that. I couldn't even notice that that guy played yesterday. Cam, was he even in the game? And I don't want to hate on him too much because it does suck when players decline over time, but it just seems like that defense needs a lot of pieces, and that goes to Dennis Allen now. Dennis Allen, the guy who got fired because the Saints had all these injuries. They lost their quarterback after week 5 against the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost multiple wide receivers, multiple offensive linemen, lost players here and there on the defensive side of the football. You take a look at what the Saints defense has looked like recently, and you take a look at how the Saints defense looked under Dennis Allen, even when they were losing, aside from that game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers early in the season, Dennis Allen was making the Saints defense better. I wouldn't want him to be the head coach of my team. Seems like he's sort of an awkward guy. I don't know if he could provide that extra motivation, that extra juice. I don't know him personally or anything like that, but it just you kind of get that vibe, right? He's not going to give a great John Gruden type speech, a great Mike Tomlin type speech. He's not a Jim Harbaugh type guy. But when you're looking at defense and week to week strategy, scheming, maintaining a top 5 unit, Dennis Allen maintaining a top 5 defensive unit with that defensive roster that you saw last night, it is a fucking miracle that he was able to do that. When you look, if they really are, and it seems like they always really were as talented as they were last night in terms of just this roster and the production, it is insane that he had that defense at a top 5 level without Marshawn Lattimore a lot of the time, who's now with the Washington Commanders. And now on the flip side with Carr, I will say he did have the benefit early in the season with Chris Olave, with Rashid Shaheed, but also like we mentioned earlier, looking at the past 4 weeks, like it's really crazy that he's had this team having a shot in hell to win some of these games. And I really hope he comes back. I really hope he comes back for this upcoming game or this next, the final game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Doesn't seem like it's worth it since they're knocked out of the playoffs. But I think what it does tell you, and you heard this on the broadcast prior to the game, is that Carr is probably going to be back with the New Orleans Saints next year. Like the GM Mickey Loomis, who seems like he's here to stay. He's probably, if it was anything, any thought in his mind of moving on from the guy to do a full rebuild, and you don't really, I mean, even if you're going to full rebuild, what do you really get out of moving on from him? I guess you don't want to win games if you're planning on tanking, but it doesn't seem like the organization is going to do that. But it just seems like he's going to be back with the Saints next year. They talked about on the broadcast, Adam Schefter, that it'd be about 30 million to keep him back next year. Most of it's fully guaranteed. You don't save much by moving on from the guy. And when you saw the performance last night, he, him and Alvin Kamara might be the best players on the entire team. I would say, and I think maybe the general manager is coming to this realization because Chris Olave is really talented, Rashid Shaheed's really talented. They've never done it. Like they're really talented, athletic guys at wide receiver, but they've never really done it. Check the numbers, check the stats. They've never really done it. And part of that has been injuries. Part of that's been, the lack of stability at the quarterback position. And you finally seen them get some of their highest, stat numbers since they've got Carr, but they've never really done it. So they're not the most talented players on the team. Defensively, I don't think you could really say anybody is talented on the Saints defensive side of the football. I mean, Jamar Davis is a really good player, but it seems like it's the age is perhaps catching up to him. And he's got a lot on his plate, being the captain and wearing that green dot for the defense as well. But like we said earlier, I do believe the defense has just declined under Dennis Allen. But when you're talking about just player, roster, valuable piece on the defensive side of the football, I'm not willing to say anybody is super valuable. Where you're basically like the team will fall apart if this guy's not on the field, if he's not on the team. I do think Carl Granderson's an underrated pass rusher, but you didn't hear a peep about that guy last night. It's kind of hard to be a good pass rusher when the Packers are able to run the ball straight up down your throat, right? So I think, there still have been some Raiders fans, and I've come to this realization that obviously Carr's not going to come back, but that is going to be squashed. It's not. There's no chance of him coming back. And for his career, and as a Raiders fan who's still a fan of Carr's game, I kind of wish he was able to go to a different team. I would really be interested to see how he would do with the Tennessee Titans. They look like they're going to be moving on from a new quarterback with somebody like Callahan, right? Bill Callahan's son. If Matthew Stafford hangs it up this year, imagine Carr with the Rams. You know that team that he almost tied the game, one play away from tying the game with the Saints roster against the LA Rams with Sean McVay that he almost tied the game 2 weeks ago before getting hurt, right? I would if Matthew Stafford hung it up, I would love to see how Carr would be with Sean McVay. I think that would be, especially with the NFC West being really vulnerable right now. If Matthew Stafford hung it up, which he's getting up there, right, and he's been battling with injuries throughout these past few years, that would be a great opportunity for DC. And New York Giants are going to get a quarterback, so nothing there. And the Jets, if the Jets look like they are going to move on from Aaron Rodgers, remember, before Derek Carr joined the Saints, he was talking to the New York Jets. He had a dinner with Robert Saleh. He met with Woody Johnson. It was almost going to happen. And according to Carr, he could have taken that job. He said this in an interview with Pardon My Take. He could have taken that job with the New York Jets, but he wanted to weigh his options out more and get more money, probably. So he decided to shop around more, and then they eventually made the trade for Aaron Rodgers. Now, I don't know if that was 100% true. He claims it was, and maybe they told him that. Maybe they did tell him that. Who knows what kind of contract they offered him? I'm sure if it was 30 million or something like that a year with some guarantees, he probably would have accepted that, given the fact that he pretty much accepted 3 years fully guaranteed, 35 million a year with the Saints. But then he ended up joining the Saints. So coming this offseason, if they did move on from him, which I don't, I would like to, I would be curious, and I would want to see him get out of there because it seems Raiders. It's like he went to a new Raiders. It's a new Raiders. But they had this legacy from 2009 when they were really good, Sean Payton, Drew Brees, and so you have a way more. You have a fan base with the Saints, and I'll say this: you have a fan base with the Saints where they actually think that they are the Chiefs. Like they think that they have been in their mind. They believe that they have been Super Bowl champs. Michael Thomas is Devontae Adams. And I will say, Kamara has proven that he is Christian McCaffrey. Yes, I will give you that on Alvin Kamara. They believe that they have just been an elite team. When, I don't know, I'm looking at Carr's record against the Saints before he joined the Saints. 2016, beat the Saints with Drew Brees, with Sean Payton. 2020, beat the Saints with Drew Brees, with Sean Payton. Oh, and by the way, he did it with two different coaches. First time with Jack Del Rio, second time with John Gruden. So I've never been too impressed with the Saints. I will say I do think they have some good players. Obviously, it's an above average team, but the fan base just thinks that they are just elite, like just the most amazing team prior to the Dennis Allen era. When really it was kind of a shit show. Even Drew Brees' last year. I mean, Drew Brees' last year went out sad. It went out sad with Brady outdoing him in his own division and winning the Super Bowl. Well, so getting back to that, Jets is a possibility. It was a possibility. Carr has to be wondering, was it a mistake to ever join the Saints in the first place? Should he have taken some other opportunities? You did hear some rumors that there were more opportunities that he didn't even speak of that were a possibility when he was shopping around in 2023. We have to wonder what they were and wonder what could have been, because clearly this was maybe not the right road to take. And there may have been some opportunities for things to go in the right direction. And I do truly believe that the first year, 2023, with all the drama, the Michael Thomas, Chris Olave's brother on social media, the injuries, right? The fan base trying to eat Dennis Allen and Carr live, the floats at Mardi Gras mocking Carr, all this happening in the 2023 season for the Saints and Carr. And they had a 9-7 record and tied the Tampa Bay Buccaneers record, and were literally a technicality. What's your conference record? What's your division record? One technicality away from making the playoffs in 2023. So maybe it was the right choice, and just things didn't work out that way. Things didn't go that road, and it didn't bounce your way, and it came up a little short. But going into this next year, I believe that they will unfortunately for Carr in a lot of ways, because I think he could find some decent opportunities if he did go elsewhere. He will be retained by the Saints for 35 million a year, and unfortunately for us Raiders fans, we can pivot to this for a little bit. Uh, yeah, I'm not. So reacting to the chat right now, I'm not hype. I've always been a reality. So it's crazy to look at the Saints season, and it just shows you how things change so quickly. Remember the first three, and I would say first four games, even though they won their first two games, blew out the Panthers, blew out the Cowboys. You had the Billie Jean. It was looking like an amazing time. You had ESPN talking about, is this the best offense in the NFL? And I would even say that carried into the Eagles' loss and the Falcons' loss, because I still feel like they were doing a great job against really talented opponents, especially looking at the Philadelphia Eagles game now. When you look at how dominant the Eagles are right now, the fact that the Saints barely lost that game because Goddard went on a drag route and two Saints defenders ran into each other. Then he runs for a touchdown. Literally, that's the only reason they lost. They lost that game towards the very end. It all came down to one play. The fact that they were in it like that shows that they were in the first part of the season one of the best teams in the NFC, going toe to toe with right now, I believe, the best team in the NFC, the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe the Eagles could beat the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. I believe they will beat both those teams and make the Super Bowl. But everything changes so quickly in the NFL. And even taking a look at the Raiders. Obviously a tough loss in week 1 against the LA Chargers. I think what was the worst part about the Raiders' loss in week 1 against the LA Chargers is the fact that the players started fighting. And right, you know, you saw the Jack Jones and even Crosby and Christian Wilkins getting into a fight with Chargers players in the very first game. At the very end of the game, that was very disappointing, and that's when I knew. That's when I knew. Okay, Antonio Pierce doesn't have his lock on this locker room like a lot of people want you to believe. Shout out to Jonathan, sending some love, man. Appreciate you. Did you see AP's press conference on draft order? He and Telesco not buddies. I think he knows he's on his way out, and F the org. And that's tricky, right? So there's like pretty much 2 to 3 possibilities going on based on Jonathan's question, which is, I think the core of your comment is Antonio Pierce in on the Raiders tank? Is he not? And then I think the second question would be, does he know his time is over with the Raiders? Now, is he in on the tank? That's always been the main question. According to what he is saying, and what he said at that recent press conference, not only did he have Monday, but he had right after the game where he said, we don't go into this to lose. We're trying to win every single week. He was reacting to fans who are upset that the Raiders win against the Jaguars, messed up the draft order. And he was, this is a comment that you see a lot of players make and a lot of coaches make, right? Which is like, hey, we have our resumes. We're trying to win games. We don't care about your fantasy football. We don't care about draft order, right? Obviously, though, and this is just objective fact, if you're the general manager, if you're the owner, if you're Tom Brady, who's going to be making some serious decisions in what, a month or two, maybe less than a month, like 4 weeks, then a higher draft pick, losing the rest of the games does benefit you. Not even in the first round, but to the second round. If you have pick 33 in the second round or 34, that is basically another first round pick. You can get some serious talent. It's basically like having 2 first round picks if you have a high second round pick. So it's a huge deal. No matter how people want to downplay it, it's an insanely big deal. Now, here's how we will know if Antonio Pierce is in on the tank or not. The main way we will know is, I would say, in about the end of the season, January 6th. I would say in 3 weeks we will know. We will know in 3 weeks, because if he is not fired after his performance this year, after his resume this year, if Antonio Pierce is not fired, then he was in on the tank. That's what we will learn. And if that's the case, then good on him. He did a really good job. Now, it wasn't that hard, considering the fact that they don't have a quarterback, tons of injuries. But I go back to how I always go back to how did we feel in April? How do we feel in May? How do we feel in June, right? I always go back to that when assessing a team. What was the intention going into this year? Now, when you're taking a look at the New York Giants, I feel like tanking was always on the table. And when you look at how the Giants operate with Brian Dable, when you look at his mood and attitude, he kind of is now hamming up fake rage, being upset that they're losing. But clearly, you can tell he really doesn't give a shit. And based on the hard knocks that happened on their offseason, he wanted to get a new quarterback, did not want Daniel Jones. Clearly thought Daniel Jones is not as productive since they made the playoffs in 2022. Even though dude, the Giants fans are all over his nuts then, but he is different than Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce to me, he looks genuinely, sincerely frustrated during these games. Like it does seem like they are trying. It also seems like for Antonio Pierce, the maybe he's frustrated that he doesn't have the roster to compete. But going back to how we felt in June, this team signed Christian Wilkins to I think the largest non-quarterback contract in free agency. We forget that Christian Wilkins was the biggest free agent acquisition, in my opinion. And obviously, like Minshew wasn't great, right? Wasn't a great choice, but it was more than what Baker Mayfield got in his first year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield had a 1 year, I believe it was a $7 million contract with some incentives his first year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2023. Now, when it comes to Minshew, the guy's making $12.5 million a year with $15 million guaranteed. There's actually a real possibility he's even on the team next year as a backup because it's a 2 year contract. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. So the team was trying to compete, and then you grab Brock Bowers. You have Devonte Adams. The fact that they didn't trade Devonte Adams during the draft to me shows that they were trying to actually, at least the intention was to compete. Because if I was going into 2024 this past season as the Raiders in March, what's the smartest thing to do? The smartest thing to do is spend zero money in free agency, cheap veteran contracts. Don't waste your cap on Christian Wilkins. What's the point if we're tanking? And I would also immediately trade Devonte Adams. His contract situation doesn't seem too happy. And you try to get as much draft capital from the Jets as possible and try to trade up to get a quarterback in that freaking draft. Because all these GMs and scouts know way more than us about these draft classes. All these GMs and scouts knew in April, in February, like 12 months ago. They knew then that this 2025 draft class is going to be worse than the 2024. And now that's completely clear going into this draft. Now, could there be a surprise? Could it turn out that 25 is better than 24 in the long term, few years down the road? Yes, that's definitely a possibility. But is it likely? No. This was an absolutely amazing quarterback draft class in 2024. And as a Raiders fan, I am pissed off because I feel like we really fucked up not grabbing one of these QBs because that was the draft to do it. I mean, like Caleb Williams, he's, with the Bears and it's been rocky, but he's clearly like going to be a good QB. Like, he's going to at least be an above average quarterback 5 years down the road, right? Bo Nix, who was selected right before the Raiders, he's doing great as well. Jaden Daniels looks like the next Lamar Jackson once Lamar Jackson's done with it, right? And Drake May, productive as hell with the New England Patriots, a team that's kind of trash, right? JJ McCarthy, we still don't know, but he did well against the Raiders in preseason. Granted, it was against the Raiders backups, but JJ McCarthy looks like he could throw the rock, right? So you had a lot of people that I feel like could have been really productive for this team in this QB draft class. Michael Penix, I think once he gets some games under his belt, we'll see how special he was. And we know the Raiders, according to the NFL insiders, take it all with a grain of salt, but I believed it to be true that they were interested in Michael Penix. And I feel like you should have pulled the trigger on the Devontae Adams trade. You should have used that draft capital to trade up. You should have just tried. You should have been aggressive. You should have gave up because now, if you don't like Cam Ward or Shador Sanders, you're gonna go for Quinn Ewers. Like, what are you really planning on doing here? You gonna take a flyer on Jalen Milroe? You really think that's gonna be as good as Bo Nix? As good as Drake May? As good as Jaden Daniels? Probably not, right? Likely not. So that was not so I digressed, but the point being, going back to Jonathan's super chat here, Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco, was the idea to tank? I think based on their free agent acquisitions, based on what they did in the draft, doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it. Maybe they're just sort of riding it out, and or maybe they believed even with the acquisition of Christian Wilkins, this would still be a bad team and they would tank anyways because of the quarterback situation. That's still a possibility. But I think we will know if Pierce is cool with Tom Telesco, if he's back. I do not believe he's going to be back. I do not think he should have gotten the job in the first place. I've been pretty clear about that on my channel. I've received a lot of flack for that, and it's no disrespect to him as a person. It's just there's only 32 of those jobs, right? As a head coach in the NFL, you better have a really good resume, and it's kind of sus when someone gets hired and they don't have a great resume for the job. It's kind of sus, well, not too sus, this happens a lot, that he was even given the interim head coaching job in the first place during the 2023 season. Patrick Graham's there. Okay, you don't want to take his attention away from the defense? All right. Yeah, it just kind of seemed a little bit weird. You had a lot of Rob Ryan, somebody who's coached at some of the highest levels before in the NFL. He's older, but you didn't want him to be the interim. There was just more qualified people on the Raiders coaching staff in 2023 that I always thought it was quite odd that they gave Antonio Pierce the interim head coaching job in the first place. Now going into 2024, I think the main reason why they did it is because of the fans. People want to blame the players. I mean, can we get real? These NFL owners, these GMs, we're reminded time and time again, and this goes for every team, not just the Raiders, which is they don't give a flying fuck what the players think. They do not care at all. They make decisions that the players do not agree with all the time. That's what these GMs, that's what these owners tend to do. They try to make the best objective decisions for the coaching staff, and they do not care about how the feelings or how the players feel, because players come and go. I mean, players come and go. Devontae Adams, he came and went. There's a couple people who stay. You got Max Crosby, who is vocal in his support for Pierce, but Max Crosby was vocal in his support for Rich Bisaccia, and that did not matter, right? So I think it was mainly the fans. I think the fans, because the fans are the ones spending the money. The fans are the ones who are watching the product, allowing the advertisers to help make the Raiders money. I think the fans really pushed for Antonio Pierce, even though he was grossly unqualified for the job, just because he looked nice subbing in for Josh McDaniels. And now it's quite clear, at least to me, that shit on Josh McDaniels all you want. I literally made a hour-long documentary shitting on Josh McDaniels that has over 1 million views. So if there's anybody who's been the poster child, and I've actually watched some of my older videos during the 2022 and 2023 season, I did go hard at Josh McDaniels. I am probably known amongst some Raiders fans as one of the biggest Josh McDaniels haters ever. But what I will say is clearly he knows how to run a team in terms of just week to week game planning, creating an infrastructure, allowing the coordinators to succeed. He's clearly better at that than Antonio Pierce. I mean, obviously, the guy has tons of experience. We the New England Patriots, the Super Bowl rings. He's been a head coach before with the Broncos, right? And I believe he will be a coach somewhere again in some time. But clearly, Antonio Pierce was able to do well in 2023, relying on the infrastructure that Josh McDaniels created. And you saw the offense look good under Aiden O'Connell with Pierce once the locker room vibes were sort of fixed after the Josh McDaniels era. Defense has gotten worse under Pierce in his first full season. Part of that's the offense not being productive, but still, you have to admit it got worse. And clearly, when it came to Pierce, and I was watching John Gruden on Barstool Sports, and I like to watch his stuff and Belichick stuff. I like watching and hearing what former coaches have to say. And what he said is the most important thing is hiring your staff as a head coach. That's the first thing you have to do. Antonio Pierce hired his staff. Now he wasn't able to get Cliff Kingsbury. We get that. All right. Not every head coach can get everybody they want when they're hiring a new staff. Yes, that happens. But you can't just say, "Oh, well, I'm completely screwed. I'm completely effed. It's over because I couldn't get Cliff Kingsbury." Like you can't throw in the towel just because of that. You got to find a way to adapt. You're not going to get every player you want. You're not going to get every coach you want. And he clearly failed to build a good staff to help him succeed in 2024. And unfortunately, and we could blame the quarterback situation, blame all these things. Unfortunately, and I am shocked to say this, and the reason why I preface this by saying that I am the biggest Josh McDaniels hater ever is because I think objectively we could say now, like Josh McDaniels was a more productive head coach than Antonio Pierce. That is how bad it is right now. That is how bad it is. It is not a product worth watching. It really isn't. It's really hard to watch Raiders games. We could blame no Devontae Adams. Yeah. Okay. We don't have one of the greatest wide receivers in the NFL. Yeah. We could blame the quarterback situation, but I mean, last year, I mean, Jimmy G, is Jimmy G like that much better than Gardner Minshew? I would say no. I'd say they're about the same. We still have Aiden O'Connell. He's been hurt. And I do want to, I actually, a quick aside, I do want to give Aiden O'Connell some credit. The guy is definitely going to be in the NFL for the next 5 or 6 years. Like the guy is going to be an employed. I don't think he'll be a starter. I think you have to be really good to do that. I do think though he has shown that he is like one of the top 60 quarterbacks in the NFL, which is really hard to be. One of the top 60 QBs in the world. I mean, that's what it really is because the NFL is the a global sport basically, and the only league that really matters when it comes to American football. So he's proven that, and he's done really well over these past few weeks. I thought he did well against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, I think his lack of athleticism will always be a ding on him. But shout out to him battling through injuries and being productive and giving his players an opportunity to catch the football. And that's all you can really do. And I think the guy has a great head on his shoulders, it seems like, and he did a really good job in this shitty situation. And I think he'll be on the Raiders next year too. And hopefully I could see him always being employed in the NFL. And I think he'd probably be a solid guy to rely on in a pinch if your main guy goes down. But when it comes to Pierce, though, man, it is really crazy. And as a big Josh McDaniels hater, I'm just shocked to say that it's worse. It really is worse. The roster's worse, but it seems like it's worse at the top. It really does. So the point being, I don't expect him back. If he is back, he was in on the tank, and hopefully we'll see 2023 Antonio Pierce's Raiders when they had a little shot at the wild card there. Couple games out. I think it was one game out, 2 games out. So hopefully that happens. Now, shout out to the chat, man, guys. Get the likes up. We got almost 180 people here. Get those likes up. Oh, and shout out to Super Awesome You. Send in some love. Appreciate you, Super Awesome You. Dude, I completely agree. I mean, I think a lot of fans feel this way. And you know what's crazy? It sucks because I thought, okay, I kind of had a feeling this year was going to go south. When the Raiders beat the Ravens in week 2, I kind of had a feeling it was a fluke win, but I wanted to celebrate it just like anybody else. So I made a video celebrating it. But I did include some comments saying that John Harbaugh mismanaged the game a little bit, made some critical mistakes. And you've seen the Ravens kind of have some blunders throughout this season. I don't think they're going to be one of the hottest teams in the AFC. I think it's Bills versus Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But that was when we kind of thought, all right, well, maybe this is really a fringe wild card team. Gardner Minshew looked good enough against the Ravens, right? The defense was elite, absolutely elite against the Ravens. Amazing performance by the defense. A couple big plays they gave up. Yeah, that's going to happen against the Baltimore Ravens offense, which is freaking fire with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. I mean, come on, it's going to happen. But I thought the defense for the investment, I thought they did amazing in that game. But then you had the Panthers game, and that's when reality started caving in, and it was like, all right, was that just a fluke? Was that just a fluke week 2? And clearly it was a fluke, clearly. And so we thought early in the season, at least from my perspective, well, at least the Saints can be kind of a refuge, for Raiders fans who, and I think the Green Bay, well, not the Green Bay Packers. That's a little too distant. But at least, with the Saints, at least that could be a space where, hey, at least this team's being productive. It's the quarterback that a lot of fans did not want to see leave, but Josh McDaniels forced out. Clearly, there has not been anybody close to the same level as Carr since he's left the Raiders. Not even close at all. Even though Aiden O'Connell is going to have a career in the NFL. I mean, I think he's a good guy. And I think I mean, he can make throws. He was making throws these past few games he's played. And against the Chiefs, I thought he did a great job against the Chiefs. But not close to the production of a franchise quarterback, right? So we thought that would be a refuge, right? Like at least we could root for the Saints. We could check them out while the Raiders clearly are going to go south and look for a quarterback high in the draft the next year. But even that was a complete shit show. And I kind of blame Saints fans. I think Saints fans, especially the ones online, because now, and you guys have noticed this on my channel, I cover all NFL teams. I dig into what's going on everywhere. I'm trying to channel and listen to everything that's going on and figure out the pulse of some of these teams when I make these videos. The Saints fans are, I think they're probably the most toxic ones in the entire NFL. And I don't know if that has to do with New Orleans. We know that's not the education levels are not that great in New Orleans. The funding for some of the schools is not that high. I don't know if that is the primary reason, but they really are, especially online, some of the most toxic in the entire NFL. And I think that kind of leads to their demise. I think because they're a smaller market team, players and coaches hear what these people say. The national media doesn't cover them that much, and I think it does psychologically affect the team, and probably led to their demise in a lot of ways. Either way, appreciate you, super awesome you, man. That really means a lot, and I hope you guys are having a Merry Christmas too. We're on Christmas Eve. Literally, I was on X talking about this game, and I thought, why not just freaking do a live and talk a little bit about this game? And we could talk some more about this game. I want to react to the chat a little bit more, guys. Get those likes up too. Got a good amount of people here, but only 72 likes. Ivan Estrella, shout out to you, bro. And let's read his comment. Not getting the first overall pick might be a blessing. Just look at Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young. There are no guarantees with picks. Now that's true. And we saw a couple of first round picks in this past game. Raiders versus Jags. We also saw Mac Jones, who was a Pro Bowler, we forget, in 2021 with Josh McDaniels. And then things went south since he was no longer attached to Josh McDaniels. And now he's a backup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Guy clearly needs to be in a pretty good system to be productive. But and this is the thing, too. And we could talk about Bryce Young. Did Bryce Young really have a shot his first year? Dude gets drafted with a brand new head coach, and that head coach gets fired immediately in his first season. He never stood a chance with the Carolina Panthers at all. Then you have a brand new head coach, and you have rumors for Bryce Young that, maybe the owner didn't want you, or the owner did want you, but the coaches didn't. There's all this bullshit he's got to deal with in year 2. Then he gets benched for Andy Dalton when they went into the season saying we're going to build around Bryce Young. So it's just been so rocky for that guy. And now you're seeing him beat the Arizona Cardinals, which are I would say one of my favorite mid teams in the NFL. A team where you're like, all right, Cardinals versus Packers, situations like that. You can see the Cardinals winning every single game they're in. They're not a great team. They're not going to make the playoffs, but they're a type of team where you're like, all right, they like you better be on your game because they can beat good teams. And you saw the Panthers beat them. That was a huge victory for the Carolina Panthers. Trevor Lawrence, I do think he's overrated. I thought he was amazing at Clemson, and I'm really shocked that things have not worked out this well. And I've seen, you see kind of like film reviews of former coaches criticizing him, saying that he's not as talented as people believe. But what you do get with a first round pick, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, and Mac Jones, going to Ivan Estrella's super chat here, that not getting a first round top pick might be a blessing in disguise. Mac Jones selected at pick 10, Trevor Lawrence pick 1, Bryce Young pick 1. As long as you're picking in the top 10, it depends on the draft class. As long as they're a first rounder, though, a high up first rounder, it's usually somebody who at least has the ability, if they're in the right situation, to be really productive. So yes, it's probably the best to have the number one pick, to pick the guy that you think is objectively the best quarterback in the draft, whether that be Shador Sanders or Cam Ward. That's the mock right now, right? But at least, especially if you're going high up in the first round in a really good draft class, you at least have somebody who has athletic ability. There's a lot of pressure with being the first pick. I mean, obviously, the last time the Raiders had the number one pick, we drafted the biggest bust in NFL history, Jamarcus Russell, which, if you did not see my video in 2022 on Jamarcus Russell when he did the Pivot podcast interview, I broke that down. I was still new at YouTube, kind of new. I was about a year in, I think. But yeah, that was a pretty funny video and a pretty funny interview because Jamarcus Russell still believes that he can go out there and throw that rock with the best of them. Jamarcus Russell still believes. And he said some pretty delusional things. And my favorite thing that Jamarcus Russell said in that Pivot podcast interview, and you guys should watch that later after this live stream, was what did he say? Oh, it was about the film, about how he got caught not watching film. And he was like, I'm not really a film guy. I make plays, bro. I score touchdowns, bro. Hilarious and funny and delusional. But I mean, look, like for the Raiders, for the new head coach, because we got super awesome. He was saying, I'm not sipping the AP Kool-Aid. I do believe it will be a new head coach, and I obviously a higher draft pick is better. You want to pick your right guy. I think it's going to work out for the Bears long term. I think it might work out for the Carolina Panthers long term. It's going to work out for the Commanders and CJ Stroud long term. You don't have to have the number one pick, having the number two, having the number three. It's going to work out for the Texans and the Commanders. And because they had that high of a draft pick, it's going to be great for them. So I still think it's obviously good to have as high of a pick as possible. You don't want to demoralize the team. But when you're looking at the Raiders team, outside of Brock Bowers and Max Crosby, like who do you really feel like you need to keep, and you need to keep and Jackson Powers Johnson, obviously, people on rookie contracts, draft pick contracts, they're obviously going to stay because it's such a bargain to have them. But there's not many players on the Raiders where you're like, oh man, we can't let this dude go. Like this guy's got to be here next year. There's not many players that you can objectively say that about. So, the morale, you want to carry the morale into next year? Yeah, you do, but how many new faces are we going to see next year? Is it going to be a lot of changes on the offensive line? Changes on the, when it comes to edge outside of Max Crosby, are there going to be changes there? I mean, Tyree Wilson, you're still tied to him, and it's been good to see him have some more productivity in Malcolm Kuntz's absence and Crosby's absence. But I think the draft pick is objectively more valuable. But it depends who you are. So the big thing with Antonio Pierce, and we've kind of digressed away from the Saints game and gone into the Raiders, but I assume that would happen, especially since you had some former Raiders on the game last night, and I think we talked a lot about the Saints, but and I lost my train of thought actually. What I was saying there, unfortunately, that was really bad. I lost my train of thought there. So it was something about Crosby. You guys have to remind me. Jacoby Myers is really, you know what? He's really good. I would not let him go. he has been very surprising. Now he's not Devonte Adams. I'm not going to go that far and say he's better than Devonte Adams, but he's a really talented veteran wide receiver they should keep into next year. So I was saying something about Antonio Pierce, was I? Man, that was so crazy. You know when something just zaps from your mind? That honestly, doing these live streams, how long I've done them, that doesn't happen that much. But it finally did right now. Uh, there was something that we had to let me scroll through the chat. Maybe that will remind me a little bit more. But Merry Christmas Eve, everyone! Shout out to Michael Bruick in the chat. Merry Christmas Eve to everybody. We're talking about the draft picks. Yeah. So picking at two, still great. New head coach possibilities. Michael Vrabel, Mike Vrabel, has been mocked to go to the Raiders, right? Former Tennessee Titans head coach, who's now a assistant with the Browns right now. I don't know if there's just rumors making that connection because he played in New England with Brady. Brady's working with the Raiders, therefore, oh, here's a rumor that Vrabel is going to join the Raiders. I don't know. Could it be Ben Johnson? That guy is going to be a hot shot commodity, one of the most sought after coordinators in the entire NFL, right? To become a head coach. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, rejected the Carolina Panthers job. I think that guy could maybe go to the Jets are probably going to pursue him. Saints are probably going to pursue him. Which, if they bring back Carr, the Saints with Ben Johnson and Carr, I mean, that could actually be pretty dangerous. We've seen the Falcons and the Bucks decline. I think the Panthers are going to ascend, but it's not like they're amazing. It's still a very vulnerable division. But party that Jan said. Oh, Shador Sanders. People are talking about him. What's up with that Travis Hunter stuff? You see all this nonstop posting about Travis Hunter's girlfriend? It just shows how toxic the internet is. Can we leave the dude alone? Can we leave the dude alone? What is he, like 22? I mean, come on. Dude, Dennis Allen, Raiders, I'm not saying to hire this guy as a head coach, but you got to make the guy a defensive coordinator if he's willing to come back. This dude knows how to run a defense. I mean, that was my earlier argument in the first part of this live. That dude, I mean, if you can't find a great head coach, like if it's between Vrabel and Dennis Allen, Vrabel's kind of like another version of Antonio Pierce where he's not really too big of a strategist. He's more of like a motivator type figure, right? Former player, right? I mean, I don't know specifically, but that's what the analysts say about him. That's his little profile, right? Obviously, we're not in the building. We don't know, right? We don't know. But if it's between Vrabel and Dennis Allen, if you got the right culture set up by Tom Brady, if you have Tom Brady saying, "Look, dude, I know this guy can't give an amazing speech every day, but he's a fucking good defensive coordinator, smart dude. Listen to this dude, and let's go win some football games." Like, it could work. It could. And I'm not like a super big Dennis Allen fan. I literally am just trying to be objective. Like, I don't care who's doing well, who's doing bad. Like, when I'm explaining these things, it's just about what I see right in front of me. Like, what is happening? What is reality? And based on what we've seen, how the Saints season is shaking out, like, Dennis Allen knows how to run a defense. For sure. And you could do a lot worse than him. Hit him up. If you can't get anybody good, hit him up. If it's between Dennis Allen and Antonio Pierce, I'm going Dennis Allen. Like, easy. If you can't get anybody else, hit him up. All right, so Ivan Estrella, shout out to you, man. Appreciate you. What do you think if we sign Sam Darnold? Now, if the Raiders are going to... So here's my asterisk, and I'm going to actually contradict the Dennis Allen thing I just said, because this is the flip side to it. This is why teams are going to and should usually hire an offensive-minded guy as your head coach, like Ben Johnson. I don't want to see the Raiders sign Sam Darnold if they're not going to get a Ben Johnson, a John Gruden, somebody like a Jim Harbaugh, like a really good offensive mind. If you're not going to have that and sign somebody like Sam Darnold, he's not going to do that well. It's just not going to happen. The main reason why Sam Darnold's doing so well is because Kevin O'Connell is an amazing offensive mind. The guy had Joshua Dobbs, the dude with alopecia, sucks, but hey, that's kind of how you guys can recognize him. Had him playing well last year, had Nick Mullins playing well at certain points last year. And it just seems like any quarterback this guy touches, had Kirk Cousins playing well last year. Any QB that Kevin O'Connell touches is going to do well. Now, Sam Darnold has proven that if he's in the right situation, he could be one of the top QBs in the NFL. But is it all because of him? Of course not. It's because of the head coach he's got. And look at the Lions. When the Lions watch the Detroit Lions decline once they lose Ben Johnson. Will Jared Goff still be an elite QB when they lose Ben Johnson? I don't think so. Unless they find brilliant offensive coordinator to take over, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't. I think you're going to see a big decline in the Detroit Lions, and you're going to be looking at Dan Campbell being like, Dan Campbell could give a good speech. He's in good shape for a man of his age. He's ripped, but dang, we could really use an offensive-minded strategist as head coach who's not going to leave. All your top offensive coordinators, they always leave and become head coaches. You got to have a Mike McDaniels situation, a Kevin O'Connell situation where, I know it's not doing well with the Niners. They got injuries, but Kyle Shanahan situation where the offensive mind stays because you got an offensive minded head coach and he's not going to leave. You're not so dependent on a coordinator. And this is what kind of, annoyed me when fans talked about, well, Antonio Pierce needs an elite offensive coordinator. So it's not his fault he doesn't have an elite offensive coordinator. Well, that elite offensive coordinator is eventually going to get a head coaching job, and you're going to be stuck in that same exact position. You don't want to be in the position where you gotta hire somebody else to do a job for your head coach, to carry your head coach. I think you don't want to be in that. I think that's a rough situation to be in. I wouldn't want to be in that situation if I was a team or an owner. Now, shout out to Jonathan. But in terms of Sam Darnold, I say yes if you get the right offensive-minded head coach. If not, it's not worth it. Not worth the money. How long do you give it till Brady leaves broadcasting and becomes our GM? Davis seems to have a larger role for him within the organization. It's up to the NFL. And I'm shocked that the NFL is, and I'm talking about all 32 owners, are allowing Brady to do what he did this year. Like, and I think other GMs and other coaches are probably pissed off about it, especially if the Raiders start doing well. I think because the Raiders are doing shitty right now, nobody cares. But even if there's these strict broadcasting rules for Tom Brady, if he's actually trying to help the Raiders win games and not just trying to make money by owning a team. Because look, Santa Claus, by the way, Santa Claus is not real. And NFL owners don't necessarily care about winning games. They care about making money. And you do not have to win games to make money. By the way, Santa Claus is also not real. Like this is just reality, right? So Brady being part of the Raiders, like we still don't know. Is he making this investment? Is he being part of the Raiders just to make money? I mean, it's a good investment. It's an NFL team. Even if it's the Panthers, it's a good investment. The shittiest teams in the NFL, it's a good investment. The Saints, invest in the Saints. Why not? It's a good investment. It's an NFL team. You're gonna make money even when they suck. You might even make more money when they suck, right? Look at Allegiant Stadium packed out with opposing fans. That's a possibility. So we still have to figure out. Now, is Brady trying to actually become an owner and manage a football team and make them competitive and make them win games? Now, if that's the case, him being a broadcaster is a complete disaster, and the NFL owner should not allow it. And if I was a head coach or a GM of another team, I'd be livid that Brady, even though he has these strict broadcasting rules, is able to get all this information about all these other teams by working as a broadcaster. You've had former coaches talk about how much intel they get. You had John Harbaugh, when Gruden was a broadcaster, not allow Gruden into the facility and into the meetings when they were going to do a Monday Night Football broadcast because he knew that Gruden would return and coach again one day, and he didn't want to give up that intel. And okay, Brady's going to abide by these strict broadcasting rules. It doesn't matter. Yeah, things like okay, does everybody always get a ticket when they jaywalk? Of course not. You don't always get a ticket when you jaywalk, when you speed, right? When you violate a traffic law, you don't always get a ticket. So there's probably plenty of times Brady violates those broadcasting rules and nothing happens because that's how shit goes. Like just because a rule is broken doesn't mean you get punished for it, and a lot of people, a lot of times it goes unnoticed. So I think he's got to pick one or the other soon. But I think if the other owners are aware and informed that he's not necessarily trying to make the Raiders competitive and it's just an investment, then I think he will remain a broadcaster. But I think if he, yeah, I think if he actually is trying to make them competitive, it's got to stop. It's got to stop at some point. There's no way. But like we said, these owners only care about money, and we have to wonder how much money are they making by having Brady be a broadcaster. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe they're going to tell these other coaches and GMs, you got to just deal with it because Brady's bringing in way too much cash as a Fox broadcaster and working for the NFL there. But shout out to everybody in here, man. Get some more likes up. We got about 85. And shout out to all the area codes. We got Cali people here. Let me know where you're from. I'm in Cali right now. Uh, in Oregon. I was actually at the airport in Portland, and somebody was a fan of the channel and said, "What's up?" So that was really cool to see, and cool that we had some Raiders fans out there in Portland too. He was wearing a Raiders hat and a Washington Huskies jacket. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, wow, Raiders really do have fans everywhere, man. You know, even in the Pac Northwest, where you would think it's mainly Cali and Nevada, but all around the West Coast. So we got Fresno, we got Modesto, awesome, awesome. Bakersfield. I got an itchy scalp. So, I talked about the Raiders a little bit. We talked about the Saints at the beginning. Talked about Josh Jacobs a little bit too as well. Talked about the draft, coaching, and yeah, new potential coaches, free agent acquisitions. Talking about the rest of how the playoffs are going to shake out. Talked about the Carr's destinations, potential destinations, but where he is likely going to go, which is remain in New Orleans next year. And if the fans haven't learned how shitty they are with him not in the game yet, then they're never going to learn. Like honestly, they're never going to learn. And you know what? And this is not no disrespect to Spencer Rattler by saying the dude's just not ready. But he definitely proved in preseason, has definitely proved in like small moments that he could be one of the top 60 guys in the NFL who at any moment could get his opportunity and go on a run, just like Sam Darnold, like a lot of these guys at any moment, like a Brock Purdy. Once you're one of those top 64 guys where you're one play away from starting, you always have the opportunity. I think Spencer Rattler could be one of those dudes. I've had people. Let me just say, I've had people associated with Spencer Rattler message me complaining about some of the negative comments from Wi-Fi Willie in his videos. But what I will say, I mean, and what I did tell this person who, let me just say, is blood related to Spencer Rattler, and I'll let this leak out a hour and 13 into the video. What I did tell this person who slid in my DMs upset about me saying that I think Jake and look, I was proven wrong that I think Jake Haener gives the Saints a better shot to win than Spencer Rattler. He only had one opportunity. There's kind of some other things going around with that Saints team when they did poorly. But the guy who hit me up about this, he was complaining about the comments. He's definitely seen my videos before, was complaining about that, about talking shit on Rattler. What I have said and what I've seen other people say about Spencer Rattler is mild. And that's why I told him, I go, if you think that these comments are like tough or like getting under your skin, the criticism that Rattlers received so far. I mean, the national media doesn't criticize this guy. They just because he's a young quarterback, they always young QBs, especially when they got the immediate background. Oklahoma was behind Caleb Williams. You got the Netflix high school show. They love that shit in the media. They're like, diverse. You got some diversity, right? They love that shit. So what I told this guy was, if this is bothering you, like, yikes, because QBs, most QBs, a lot of QBs, like Carr, someone on your own team, they get way more shit. People criticize them way harder than anything I or anybody has said about Spencer Rattler for the 2024 season. So what I told this person who is blood related, I will say, and then also this person's messaging a content creator. I mean, I could leak this whole conversation. I could, and you know what? And I did send when Spencer Rattler came in. I could leak this whole conversation, and so that's just somewhere so sloppy of them to do that. But when Spencer Rattler did do well, subbing in for Jay Kaner last week, I messaged this person and said, you know what, Spencer Rattler's looking like an all pro. He's looking great today. Because I wanted to also be positive and be nice. Now, was he actually looking like an all pro? Obviously not, but I was being nice. And that's when they said maybe you'll stop talking shit on him. And then now we have this Packers game, which is like, ugh, jeez, I could just blow this guy up right now. But I'm such a nice person that I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But I guess I kind of did it in a little way. But yeah, it's no disrespect to him. I think it's clearly significantly better. And just like with Aiden O'Connell, like with wanting another quarterback for the Raiders, no disrespect to Aiden O'Connell either. It's just we're just trying to go based on what we're seeing here, and shit. Saints are a shitload better with Carr at QB, and the Raiders would be a shitload better if they had a quarterback who is a little more athletically talented than Aiden O'Connell. Yeah, I am very nice. Yeah, I really am nice because I literally like like why would you message a content creator and start ranting about you're literally a family member and you're messaging a content creator about stuff like this? Like you're just so lucky it's not somebody like those aggregator accounts or just any of these other content creators. They would just instantly so and so's blank message me. So and so's blank came after me. Here are the leaked DMs of so and so pissed off at me for saying this. Like, yeah, but I got a good heart. I got a good heart. Um, so shout out to everybody, man. Any more comments? I just wanted to pop in, react to the game, wish everybody a Merry Christmas Eve. I wanted to talk about the Raiders a little bit because also feel like I did not get to react to the Jags win, which you were literally at pick number one, and we still and you moved to pick six. They moved to behind the Jags. The Raiders moved behind the Jags in the draft order. That's how much of a disaster it was for the Raiders to win that game, straight up. So didn't get to react to that game, but people have been saying, where are the Raiders videos? Like, you gotta make a Raiders video. I have made some Raiders videos. Just scroll down. But my two biggest videos as of late have been about other teams because unfortunately for the Raiders, and people have said, hey, you're not making enough. And look, I'm not one of these dudes like a lot of content creators where I just spam. I just have to spam making like a junk video every day. I'm not one of those dudes. Like I'm very selective. I wait for there to be actually something to talk about. And look, as somebody who's a YouTuber who does generate some income from this stuff, like, yes, I would love for there to be something to talk about every single day. But I can't in good faith do that every single day because I know there's not, and I'm not going to just, and, even if a game happens, like, okay, the Raiders lost. Oh, well, like, you know what I mean? Like that happened recently. I guess there's a little bit of something because of the draft thing, but I'm not gonna make a whole video just to tell people that the Raiders draft position changed because of a win. I mean, it's still It's not a big story. There's no there's nothing there really, right? And I really didn't I don't really feel like making a video just saying, well, the Raiders are still doing shitty and they don't got any players. Pierce, he's still new. Maybe should have been hired, and now their draft position sucks even when they win. So they should tank. I mean, like what is that? That's like a 20-second video. So I'm kind of still, when there's a story is when we'll make some stuff. But we are going to be vamping up some stuff and covering some more NFL. Like the Devondre Campbell, the Niners, when that dude left the game mid-game, I made that video because that was a huge story. I had to make a video about that. And then Kirk Cousins getting replaced for Michael Penix Jr. We all saw it coming, and then it finally happened so quickly. That was huge. So we'll be reacting to some of the bigger stories in the NFL. We're still gonna obviously cover our favorite team when there's some big news, and there's gonna be some big news soon because some critical decisions are gonna be made within these next few weeks for the Raiders right after the season ends. I'm pretty positive. So we'll see what's up. Guys, get in your last questions or comments right now. We're gonna sign off in a few minutes, unless anything changes. So get in your last questions or comments now. No Taysom Hill for the Saints too. That's been a big deal. Yeah, they lost Taysom Hill against the Rams with Carr, and they partly had a shot in that game because of Taysom Hill. Yeah, say on the offensive side of the football, the Saints have injuries, but I would say defensively, outside of Marshawn Lattimore, it's been pretty much the same all year. And you know what? Because of how bad, and we did not even talk about this. We didn't even talk about Raiders versus Saints this upcoming week because it kind of doesn't matter. If Carr's not going to play, like, who really cares about that game? A Foster Moreau revenge game? Like, it doesn't matter. Josh McDaniels is not the head coach. Carr likes Antonio Pierce. He says positive things about him whenever he's asked about him. So there's nothing to really. It kind of sucks. And I almost bought tickets to that game. I'm really glad I did not. I almost bought them in October. I'm really glad I did not buy tickets to the Saints versus Raiders game. That would have been a huge waste of money to watch Spencer Rattler go up against Aiden O'Connell. But that game like doesn't matter as much anymore. I look, the Raiders are going to mess up their draft position anymore. The Raiders are going to beat the Saints. I mean, unless the Raiders are really that bad. I mean, the Jags may somehow be worse than the Raiders, but if the Saints play like how they did last night, I believe the Raiders will win that game. Uh, I mean, the Raiders' offense is better than the Saints' offense right now. Like, Aiden O'Connell is a better quarterback than Spencer Rattler. I will say that. Let's get into that shit. Aiden O'Connell is 100% right now. Things could change. Don't come after me, family members of the Rattler family. Don't come after me in my DMs again. But things could change. But right now, Aiden O'Connell is a better quarterback than Spencer Rattler. I mean, is that like? Does anybody disagree with that? Is that crazy to say? That seems pretty normal to me. I mean, and Raiders fans might be wishing that that Spencer Rattler goes off against the Raiders because we need a higher draft pick. So I hope I am, you know what, because I am rooting for the tank because I believe the Raiders will get a new head coach. I don't think winning games really helps. Um, I hope I hope Spencer Rattler whoops the Raiders freaking ass. If it means that they get a much higher draft pick, it's not even going to be that much, but it's still a little bit better. I mean, but is it going to happen? No. Raiders are going to win that game. They are going to. I believe they will win that game. And you know what? I'm gonna go live. 10 a.m. Sunday, December 29th. Even though Carr's not playing, I'm going live. So you guys all need to be there. 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'll be doing play-by-play and reaction, making some comments. I've been able to get the TV set up in my room pretty well, so my recording room. So that'll be pretty badass, dude. We'll do that because it'll be interesting. Even though they're both bad teams, They're kind of in the same ballpark, so it should be interesting. Like they have good players here and there. Raiders have more injuries on defense for sure, though. But Raiders have better players on offense. You got Brock Bowers. Oh, and by the way, yeah, Audrey has her own channel. It gets way more views than NFL stuff. So we lost her. I don't think she's coming back anytime soon. She's way too busy, and she's getting serious views on her other channel. She's busy. These NFL teams do like to win. Too much pride. Whew, if Jaden Daniels was on the Raiders, we would still have Devontae. Dude, we should have figured some shit out with Devontae, man, because you saw him have that 200-yard game with Aaron Rodgers. Look, I'm not the guy. Like, if you want somebody to just shit on every player who leaves the Raiders, like, I'm not that guy. I'm too like, if somebody's super good and seems chill, like, I'm gonna root for them. And Devontae is still an amazing wide receiver. The dude's about to replace Garrett Wilson and get him booted off the team. He's so good because Garrett Wilson's not getting enough targets with the Jets. Send him to the Raiders. He's good, but Devontae's better and he's older. That's crazy. Like that's how good Devontae is. Dude, her stuff is blowing up so much that it is kind of that. Like it's literally not worth like she's too like she should be working on her stuff. Anytime she's not doing that, like just resting until you go back to that thing because that is killing it right now. She's about to pass me in subscribers in like 2 months. She did it in like less than 2 months. Look, can we at least? You know what? I wish Carr. Now I really wish Carr was playing in the Saints versus Raiders game. But yeah, like yeah, I think the Saints because the Saints have better players on defense who are healthy, worse players on offense. But if they had Carr, I do think they beat the Raiders. But now, 100% Raiders are going to win. The only way the Raiders do not win is if Pierce is actually in on the tank, which is still like possible. I don't believe he's in on the tank, but we have to be open that is possible. Dude, I would have really liked to see Carr versus Josh McDaniels and Jimmy G. That's what I really wanted, but we didn't get that. Sucks. All right, guys. So I've been live for an hour and 27 minutes. Get in your final questions and comments. I am going to buzz off soon. Merry Christmas Eve, everybody. Don't get catfish. They have these filters. Isn't that crazy? They have these like weird filters where you could make yourself look hotter with this YouTube mobile live. We'll see how this shakes out, how this plays. Let me know in the comments if you're able to see the live chat when you're watching this not live. If you're somebody who's watching this not live, let me know if you're able to see the live chat while you're watching the replay. I may do more of these if that's the case. YouTube needs to get their crap together and fix a lot of these features. If that and I think that really adds a fun dynamic to the show. If that is the case, then I will try to do more of these. But definitely 10 a.m. Pacific time Sunday, I'm gonna be live for that 3 hours and 15 minutes reacting to the Raiders versus Saints, man. Shout out to Lawrence in the chat, a member. Shout out to all the members, man. And I'm gonna peace out here. Peace out, everybody, and I hope you have a good one.